Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the farm. We're starting out early this morning out here in the garden. I apologize ahead of time for the irrigation pumps running in the background, but there's nothing we can do about that. But we're going to do a little walkthrough in the garden this morning, give you an update on that, so stick around. Beautiful, nice, cool morning out here this morning. My favorite time to be out here. We'll start with an update on the Zebo project. We'll go in here and show you what we got. Check that out. We have electricity. You can see where we ran it through from our trench back there in the back, and then we put it in conduit. Got another set of plugs down here. Got our light switch, plugs up here for our lights, and then our plug over here for our master built 800 that I was finally able to move out of the garage. But it's coming along out here. It's going to be a nice entertaining space. This isn't staying. This is just here temporarily to give me some place to sit in the shade. But we got our French drain rock put in over the weekend. If you remember, we left this gap here so the water would have some place to go and it wouldn't just be resting up against the bin side and get all that corroded. So now the water can drain actually down into the dirt. But we have a really nice table and chair set coming for the inside of this. It's a material that's synthetic, but it looks like wood, made by some Amish folks. That set's been on back order for like a year. We haven't been able to get it, but our local garden center has informed us that he has a set ready for us. He's going to be picking it up, so we should be getting it very soon, and we're real happy about that. But we'll show you when those come in. They're really nice, they're very comfortable, and they'll last basically forever. Now, I got a few things I'm going to do before we do the rest of this tour. Still a little dark out here to be getting out in the garden, but we're going to have another one of our beautiful Nebraska sunrises. We'll see in a minute. Now, one of the first things I need to do this morning is we got to get some neem oil on the garden because we have some pest pressure going on with some of our squash and some of our leafy greens. So if you've never used neem oil, it's non-toxic. You can spray it the same day you harvest. It's just an oil is all it is. And it applies at the same rate that this hose-end sprayer applies it, so you don't have to dilute it or anything like that. Normally with a concentrate, this shows gallons. So if you're going to spray 10 gallons, you would put your concentrate in here, then you'd fill it with water to the number 10, and then that would put on 10 gallons once it's empty, and the rate would be correct. But this goes in the same rate that it is applied, so we don't have to do any mixing. We can just dump this straight into our hose-end sprayer. So we're going to open this thing up. You can tell when the oil starts coming out because the spray looks a little more like white. So now that we got this on, we're just going to be hitting our squash with it. This is our buttercup, butternut, and Hubbard squash. So we'll give it a good soaking. All right, we got all of our neem oil sprayed. We sprayed it on all of our squash, and we sprayed it on our leafy vegetable greens like the kale and stuff like that. I cut all the kale out yesterday because it had some like black aphids in it. And we also did it on the cucumbers because that's the items in the garden that tend to get the most pressure by those little aphids. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some weed spray, and we need to go just around the perimeter fence of the garden because we're starting to get some weed to get in there, and it's time to do it. Now here's a tip that's going to save you a boatload of money, folks. Now if you do any kind of weed spraying, you'll go to the stores, either be at the big box store or like your local hardware store or garden center. You'll see these gallons or even smaller containers of pre-mixed weed spray. And it usually has a little trigger sprayer with it and stuff like that. Yes, that is very convenient because you don't have to do any of the mixing or anything like that. But it's costing you a bunch of money. For that gallon of premix spray, you're probably going to pay anywhere from $20 to $30 for that. And if you want to save a bunch of money, here's what you got to do. Buy your spray in concentrate. So this gallon right here that'll cost you that same $30 is able to mix 85 gallons of spray. So you can imagine the cost savings there. Just need to make sure you get one of these little cups that measures ounces. Figure out on the label how many ounces per gallon. This is a 2-gallon sprayer, so you would double that obviously. And then I put a little bit of the laser blue spray pattern indicator fluid in with the mix because that lets you see where you've sprayed already, and it only takes an ounce of this per gallon. So that leaves a nice little blue indicator, so if you're spraying a larger area, you can tell what's already been sprayed. Now get you some gloves. I use these nitrile gloves, and don't buy your like medical grade nitrile gloves because they're pretty thin. Go to an auto parts store and they sell a real heavy grade nitrile and latex glove for mechanics that they use for like changing wheel bearings and doing different mechanic works. Keeps the grease off of your hands. And these are a real heavy duty glove. They're really nice. And if you can get the longer ones that go up your wrist a little ways, that's even better. Now obviously you want to be careful when you're mixing this stuff. Like I said, use gloves, make sure you're not spilling everything everywhere, and when you're all done, make sure you rinse out your container and everything's cleaned up. So we're going to mix up just 2 gallons of this is all we need. And we're not even going to use the whole 2 gallons going around our garden, but whatever's left over will go around the homestead. Any place we need a little spot spraying where there's weeds growing, like a couple in here, there's a couple over here. I'll just go around and spot spray. Now a couple other tips when you're like buying equipment. This is a 2-gallon weed sprayer like we said earlier. Make sure you buy one that's got a pressure relief vent, because you don't want to be opening up this canister when you're done and getting a bunch of pressure up through there blowing on you. This allows you to crack the pressure real slow so you can open the top without any pressure, and it's much easier to open. Now also you want to spray on the day where there's no wind. That's why I'm doing it very early this morning, because the wind tends to kick up here in Nebraska right around 8 o'clock. You'll start getting a wind. And you don't want weed spray over spraying, blowing on to any of your plants. You want to keep it where you spray it. The other thing you want to do, make sure you're wearing long pants when you're spraying, because some of that overspray may drift around, like I said, and get on you. You don't want it on you. And then once you go in and you're done spraying, immediately take a shower or whatever, just in case you got the stuff on you. I'm hyper allergic to glyphosate, which is in a lot of these weed sprays. I immediately get a rash and itchy when I get that stuff on me at all. I know immediately when it's on my skin. So also make sure if there is just a slight little breeze, I always make sure that I'm spraying down real close to the stuff I'm spraying. I'm not holding it up in the air 2 feet or whatever. Get right down on the area you're spraying and spray with standing on the upwind side. So if say the wind was blowing this direction, I would stay on the upwind side. So if I'm spraying the other side of the perimeter, instead of standing on the outside of the fence, I'd stand on the inside of the fence. So you want to make sure if there's any breeze at all that it's blowing the material away from you instead of towards you. Another tip on the weed spray that I forgot to mention to you, put your water in your spray container first, because if you were to put your spray material in there beforehand, when you go to fill with water, sometimes that stuff will foam up, and to get the proper level in your tank, it'll foam up and boil over the top of that container, getting weed spray material all over the stuff, and a lot more likely that you're going to come in contact to it. So don't do that, folks. So we've seen lots of deer around here lately. The deer are really thick here in Nebraska. If you get away from the city areas, they're everywhere. And I can tell you, our experimental deer fence that we put around the garden has worked phenomenal. So you can see our pennant flags up here. And this is the design of my own. What the previous owner had before is he had the cattle panel fence, and then out here about 4 to 6 feet he had a shorter fence. I believe had a hot wire on it too. And that only messed with them with the hot wire, but it messed with their depth perception, that they didn't think they could clear this fence with this other fence out here that they already had to jump over. And that's the technique that he used. Well, the problem I had with that was you had this no man's land in between that you couldn't get the mower in without taking down the electric fence and all that. So I'm like, well, if you can play with their depth perception and throw them off that way, why can't I do it up top and come out from the fence with these flags? And the flags are always waving around because we always have a little breeze here in Nebraska. And that'll get them thinking that they can't clear this cattle panel, because this cattle panel alone would not stop a deer. They'd hop over it like it was not even there. But with these flags up around 6-7 feet, it messes with their minds and they don't think they can get through here, where in actuality, if the deer jumped right through here, they'd be fine. But deer are very cautious animals, and if they have to think about things more than a little bit, they won't do it. All right, first off, here is our broccoli and cauliflower that we planted. It's starting to take off. It's got over its transplant shock and the roots are starting to grow. We only have a couple little plants here that are just taking their time, but I think they're going to make it. They're fine. They're still nice and green. And then we have that butter crunch lettuce that we planted out of the greenhouse. This needs to be harvested within the next day or two. This one's already showing signs of wanting to bolt, but the leaves are still real nice on here, and this is still real good lettuce. This over here is some more of the butter crunch lettuce that was harvested not too long ago, but it's starting to grow back. This is kind of a kale plant that was planted out of place kind of over here. The rest of the kale is down here. I'm going to start taking these cages up and getting them out of the way. So this is the kale that I picked yesterday, and you can already see that it's going to grow back from all the center leaves, all the little leaves, and we'll have another huge crop of kale. Now we're about kaled out this season, but the chickens love it. So Kelly harvests this a little bit at a time and gives it to the chickens. Next row here was our kohlrabi. It's all been harvested and gone. Next over here is our cucumbers. There was only 2 cucumber plants here. We have got so many cucumbers off just this little patch. It's been unreal. We've got all the pickles that we need canned away and put in the root cellar. And I've even made 2-gallon jars of pickles for my cousins, and some other half-gallon jars and about 3-quart jars of pickles for my cousins as well. So unbelievable how many cucumbers we got out of just this little tiny patch with 2 plants in it. And then our dill right here is starting to go to seed, but it's still usable. Still got a good dill flavor if you use it. Our jalapenos are full of jalapenos. You can see the plant's got peppers all through it. And these are nowhere close to being done, folks. We're going to pick these tomorrow. I'm going to make some of our cowboy candy. And if you're interested in that, we have a video in our canning playlist. But we'll harvest all these jalapenos tomorrow and wait for the next round, because there will be 3 or 4 more rounds of jalapenos. And then our artichokes that we planted are starting to take off. This one a little more so than that one, but they're both still in good shape. Boy, Cat's going crazy over there with... This was our bok choy that's all been harvested. The last couple plants were a little too far, and they made it to the chicken coop too. They absolutely love those. And onto our tomatoes and marigolds down here. We're starting to finally see some cherry tomatoes that will be ripe very soon. I came through yesterday and side pruned these tomatoes. So what I do is anything that's not weavable in the cattle panel that's growing out crazy sideways, I just cut off. And you can do that all through the season. It does not hurt your plants at all. But you can see this plant is loaded with blossoms. So some of your other places that are gardening in other areas of the country, your tomatoes may be tapering off already, but we're just still kind of getting started here in Nebraska. Now, like this plant here will weave through the other side of that panel, and it'll weave up through there and stay vertical. So some of these other plants are a little sluggish, but they're nice and green and they're growing. We have some larger tomatoes. These are the San Marzanos that are starting to come on. Starting to show some green tomatoes finally. And then our celebrities, you can see we're starting to get some green tomatoes finally. And then this is our snow peas down here. They're not growing quite as well as the green beans, but they are climbing. But I come out here and I just pick these things and eat them right off the plant. They're very tasty. But we're still getting flowers. So we'll see if they climb a little more. We got some to pick out here actually. And then our couple heads of cabbage that are growing. I'm going to go ahead and pick these within the next few days because I don't want the heads to start opening. We have some pest damage visible on the outer leaves, but that doesn't hurt the inner leaves. And we've got something digging underneath this one here. I don't know what's digging. But we'll harvest these. We'll make some coleslaw. We'll make some sauerkraut out of these. Got another one down here. But we'll take care of these in the next couple days. Got our jalapenos, or excuse me, habaneros down here. And they're full of flowers. They'll be producing peppers here very soon. And then the next row starts off with our watermelons that are taking their own sweet time growing. These two plants on this end are a little smaller. This one's kind of getting intertwined with the other one next door. So we might get some crossbreed watermelons. But this is the Crimson Sweet down here. You can see we already got a couple melons forming in there. But hopefully these other two down here get going. Those are the Sugar Baby. They're a smaller, like icebox melon. And then our cantaloupe here, flowers all over it. This is going to produce lots of fruit. I can already see a couple small cantaloupes in here inside. But we'll get more cantaloupes than we could ever use just off of this one little plant right here. So the squash is really busting out down here. This is our butternut, blue Hubbard, and buttercup squash. So once we get these cabbages out of the way, they'll have room to sprawl all the way out here. I'm going to be pulling up our yellow squash probably this week. We've had just about enough of those. We've got everything canned that we're going to can as far as our squash relish, stuff like that. And I really don't care for the yellow squash as well as I do the zucchini. So those will be gone and out of the way, and these squash can run all the way over to the fence, and they will. They'll probably even climb the fence. And you don't have to let this stuff get out here. You can chop off these runners that get out if they're getting too far, because you've already got plenty of flowers and squash growing out in the center of that. You can control these plants if you would like. It doesn't hurt them to prune them little things off. You've got flowers and squash all through there in the inside. But the more you let them grow, the more fruit you're going to get off of them. We've got so many buttercup or butternut squash last year. It was unreal. Now I moved this vine yesterday because it was getting over into the green beans, and I must have broke it over in here somewhere because this is all wilting back. But not going to hurt nothing. We've got plenty in here. And then this is our green bean trellis, doing really well. I've been checking every time I come out here to see if we have beans, but you can see all the flowers are just now starting to come on. So those are going to produce green beans, and they're still climbing. I'm sure they're going to meet in the middle up here. And the nicest part, this year we can stand up and pick green beans instead of wallering around down on the ground. That hurts my back. So we'll be canning all these green beans up. We'll probably show you how to do it. We've never done a video on green beans, so we'll get that going once we start canning green beans. Like I said, these two yellow squash are probably going to go. The bees love those big flowers, big bumblebees, and my honeybees. So this is what's left of our zucchini down here. We're still getting loads and loads of zucchini. I gave away a bunch the other day, but they're still producing like crazy. And this is only probably a third of the plants that we had. I went through earlier and I pulled up every other plant. There used to be a plant right here in the middle and in the middle here. But once these got big enough and were producing really heavy, I jerked out every other plant and got rid of those. So we have 3 zucchini plants left that are just booming and giving us plenty of zucchini for fresh eating and even giving away. Because like I said, we've already canned all of our zucchini relish and everything that we need for the year. So if you recall from our weed control video, I said don't water your weeds, meaning don't water with a sprinkler and all that. The only place our plants get water is right down the row. There's a drip line right underneath that mulch, and you can see out here in the middle we don't get weeds germinating because they don't get water. This stays dry out here unless it rains. Now after a good rain, I got to come through here with our wheel hoe and run through here real quick. But very rarely will you get a weed out here in the walk path. And because of the mulch, you only get very sporadic weeds in here. In fact, I don't even see any right now. So it pays. Don't water your weeds, folks. Our volunteer pumpkins out here are forming. These must have been the bumpy ones because you can see this one's starting to get the bumps on it. But this just grew out here out of our compost pile from some of the ornamental pumpkins that we got last year from our cousin's pumpkin patch. And once they were all done, I smashed them up and threw them in the compost. Well, some of the seeds germinated. Now these pumpkins here, folks, don't get any water at all. There's no water that gets out here other than just whatever rain or dew they get from Mother Nature. And you can see they're growing just fine. So that goes to show you how easily you can overwater your garden. I've only had to run water on this garden out here like 3 times this season. And I probably didn't even need to do that, and the only reason I did it because some of these squash looked a little wilty. But even these were wilted down, and they pop right back overnight. They just get a little stressed during the day, but they're growing fine without any help from me. Over here with the girls and Cat, he finally gonna be quiet for us. Kelly's clematis is growing up onto the chicken coop nicely, gives us a little more shade during midday. Girls are doing great. We're up to 14 eggs a day, which is a lot of eggs. Kelly pickled some eggs the other day, but we sell them to some of our, like Kelly's co-workers buy some, and we give some away too. But we couldn't be happier with the girls. They ate a lot of greens in here yesterday. In fact, I got a video of that I'll show you. The grapes are looking good. They have produced plenty of canes that we need for the cordon prune that we're doing. And if you remember, we mulched with a bunch of our lawn clippings down here a couple weeks ago. You can see there's no weeds. Mulch is amazing, folks. We do go down in here, and wherever there's a new grape cane growing, we take those loose. Kelly's chocolate mint going crazy. We need to make some more tea here pretty soon. I got to pluck all those out of there. But you see, we went through and spot sprayed this morning with our leftover spray. Eventually we're going to do some more of these bricks along here since we have them. All of Kelly's sunflowers are starting to bloom out here besides the barn. Going to be a real pretty show out here. You can see all this from the road, so it looks nice. I gave him some water yesterday. Now that's just about all we have to show you this week, folks. We hope you enjoyed the little tour. Got a little overcast going on today. It's super cool this morning. I wish we were staying home because I could get some shop projects done in this. But we haven't got a lot of rain lately. You can see the outer areas here in the unirrigated portion of the grass is starting to dry up. They say here in Nebraska, you're only 10 days away from a drought and only 1 day away from a flood. And after 2 years of being here, I believe that. But we're going to head into town. My cousin is short-handed at her restaurant, so we're going to go help out today. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us here on Mark Kelly Farm.